Welcome back, everyone. You know when you sent in this book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson, I was so excited for this deep dive.
That's a good one.
It really is, and it's a topic that I think so many people can relate to.
Absolutely.
And maybe haven't had the language to fully describe or understand.
Yeah, and I think the idea that our parents might be the less mature ones,
Right.
even as adults, can be kind of a mind shift for people.
Yeah, it is.
But this book approaches it not from a place of blame,
Right.
but really from a place of understanding and healing so you can build better relationships.
I like that no blame games.
No.
And one of the things that really struck me right at the beginning was this concept of emotional loneliness.
Yes.
As being like a core wound from having emotionally immature parents.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff, and I think a lot of us feel that way sometimes.
Right.
But we don't really have the language to describe it.
Exactly.
In the book, David describes his experience growing up feeling like he was utterly isolated, like floating in the ocean with no one around him.
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful image.
Yeah, it's about feeling unseen
Right.
and unheard emotionally, even when you're physically present.
With family, with people who should be your support system.
Exactly.
So it's not necessarily about parents being mean
Right.
or abusive. It's just they're not able to meet those deeper emotional needs.
Exactly. And Gibson really emphasizes that it's not about age, it's about specific patterns of behavior.
Okay, so let's get into that. What are some of the signs that you might be dealing with an emotionally immature parent?
Well, think back to your own experiences.
Okay.
Did your parent overreact to small things? Were they uncomfortable with talking about or dealing with deep emotions?
Yes. Actually, yeah, my dad would just completely shut down if
Right.
I tried to talk about anything serious.
Very common, yeah. And emotionally immature parents can be very self-absorbed
Right.
to the point where their child's needs kind of get overshadowed. Or they might be really loving one minute and then completely distant the next.
Oh, the inconsistency.
Yeah.
That's so frustrating.
It creates this unstable environment where you don't feel safe and secure in the relationship.
Right.
Gibson talks about how these behaviors often stem from the parent's own deep-seated anxieties that they might not even be aware of.
So it's not even intentional.
Right. It's like a defensive reaction.
Right.
Without even realizing they're doing it.
Interesting.
Now, here's where things get really interesting. Gibson outlines 4 distinct types of emotionally immature parents,
Okay. Let's hear it.
each with its own unique impact.
Okay.
So first we have the emotional parent.
Okay.
Think drama king or queen.
Okay.
Prone to emotional outbursts, volatile, constantly needs soothing from other people.
Oh, I know a few people like that.
Right. Always a sense of crisis.
Yeah.
And then you have the driven parent.
Okay.
These parents are very focused on achievement and success, often view their children as extensions of themselves,
Right.
and push them to meet their own ambitious goals.
That's a lot of pressure.
It is a lot of pressure to live up to someone else's expectations.
Especially if it's different from what you were passionate about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's the passive parent.
Okay.
Now, this parent might seem easygoing on the surface,
Right.
but they tend to avoid dealing with anything difficult,
Oh.
which can leave their kids feeling very unprotected and unsupported.
It's still a form of neglect.
Exactly. The lack of boundaries and that willingness to step up
Right.
and handle those challenges can be very damaging.
Interesting.
And then finally, we have the rejecting parent.
Okay.
This type prefers to be left alone,
Okay.
avoids engaging in family life, leaves their children feeling unwanted
Oh.
and emotionally starved.
They're all so different, but they all share that common thread of emotional neglect.
Precisely. No matter which type you're dealing with,
Right.
that core wound of feeling unseen, unheard, and emotionally unsupported is the same.
So how do you cope?
That's a great question, because Gibson talks about how kids adapt
Okay.
and develop these coping mechanisms, things like healing fantasies,
Okay.
role selves,
Okay.
to try to get their needs met.
Like survival tactics almost.
Yeah,
So what are healing fantasies?
So, imagine a child believing that if they behave a certain way,
Okay.
they can somehow fix the parent or the situation.
Right.
It's an attempt to gain some control
Right.
and earn that love and acceptance they're craving.
Create a narrative where they have agency
Exactly.
when they feel powerless.
Yeah, it makes sense when you think about how kids try to make sense of the world around them.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the role selves.
Okay.
Have you ever felt like you had to be a certain way to please your parents?
Oh, 100%.
Right.
Like a people pleaser.
Yes, people pleaser, the good kid.
Yeah.
So the role self is basically a persona that you adopt
Okay.
to fit in and please your parents, often at the expense of your own true self.
It's a form of self-protection.
Exactly, a way to avoid conflict
Right.
and rejection.
Makes sense.
And this leads to a really important distinction that Gibson makes. Internalizers versus externalizers.
Yes, I remember reading about this, and it's so true. Not everyone reacts the same way.
No, not at all.
These types of parents.
Right. And understanding these different coping styles can be so insightful
Okay.
as you're kind of unpacking your own experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So think about it. Do you tend to blame yourself for problems? Take on too much responsibility? You might be an internalizer.
I think I tend to internalize, but sometimes I can be a bit of an externalizer too.
Sure, it's not always black and white. You have tendencies towards both.
Right, depending on the situation.
Exactly.
This is so interesting.
Sure.
Just these different types and how kids adapt.
Yeah.
It's already giving me so much more clarity.
I'm glad to hear that. And we're just getting started. Now that we understand these basic dynamics, let's explore how these patterns can impact your life as an adult.
Okay.
And more importantly, what you can do about it.
Let's do it. Yeah, it's amazing how those early experiences can really shape how we form relationships as adults.
It's true. You know, those internalized patterns, those healing fantasies and role souls that we talked about,
Right.
they can become so ingrained
Right.
that we don't even realize they're stemming from our interactions
Mm-hmm.
with emotionally immature parents.
So we're kind of on autopilot, just like
Exactly.
replaying those old scripts
Living out those patterns.
without even realizing it.
Yeah, and that's why Gibson really emphasizes this importance of waking up to your true self.
Okay, I love that. But what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
Like waking up to your true self?
Well, yeah.
I'm picturing like a big alarm clock
Right.
going off.
It's a little more subtle than that,
Okay.
but it starts with recognizing that disconnect between who you truly are at your core
Okay.
and those roles that you've been playing,
Right.
those fantasies that you've been clinging to. So it's kind of like peeling back the layers of an onion
Okay.
to really reconnect with that authentic self.
So where do you begin?
Well, Gibson actually frames it as a breakdown process,
Okay.
but in a positive sense.
Hi.
It's about those moments when the pain of living out those old patterns becomes so great that you're forced to confront them
Mm-hmm.
and seek a new way of being.
Okay.
So, you know, you might be experiencing anxiety or depression
Okay.
or just this general sense of unease.
Okay.
And these can actually be signals that your true self is trying to break free.
So those difficult emotions are actually a catalyst for growth.
Absolutely. They're a sign that something's not aligned,
Okay.
that you're out of sync with your authentic self.
You have to pay attention to them.
Exactly. Those signals are trying to tell you something important.
Wow. This is really resonating with me, but it also sounds like a lot of work.
It can be challenging. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
But it's also incredibly liberating.
Oh.
And I think the key here is to approach this whole process with self-compassion.
Okay.
Give yourself permission to feel those things without judgment.
Right.
And remind yourself that you're worthy of love and belonging, just as you are imperfections and all.
So you're shedding those layers of self-doubt and criticism
Exactly.
that you might have internalized from those early experiences.
Yeah, and it's about reparenting yourself.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
giving yourself that validation and care that you may not have received consistently growing up.
So let's say you've done that work.
Right.
You're more in touch with your true self. How do you then navigate relationships, especially with people who maybe are still stuck in their own pattern?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Right. Especially when it's family.
Especially when it's family, and this is where Gibson offers some really practical advice.
Okay.
It's about shifting your focus from trying to change those emotionally immature people
Okay.
to managing interactions with them.
You can't control their behavior.
Exactly. You can't control other people,
Right.
but you can control how you choose to respond.
Okay.
And you're not responsible for fixing them or making them emotionally mature.
Right.
That's their journey.
Okay.
Gibson calls this the maturity awareness approach.
Okay.
And it really comes down to accepting those people for who they are.
Not who you wish they would be.
Exactly.
Easier said than done, I think.
It is. But Gibson breaks it down into these 3 actionable steps.
Okay.
So the first step is detached observation.
Okay.
So it's about taking a step back from the situation
Okay.
and just observing the other person's behavior without getting sucked in.
Creating some distance.
Exactly.
So you're more of an observer
Right.
than a participant.
Yes, and that can be really helpful in those moments when you feel yourself getting triggered
Right.
or pulled back into those old patterns.
Right.
The next step is to focus on having goal-oriented interactions.
Okay.
So that means going into those interactions with a clear sense of what you want to achieve,
Okay.
rather than trying to change the other person.
So you're not trying to get them to see your way
Exactly.
act differently.
You're setting realistic expectations
Okay.
and boundaries.
Okay.
And that leads us to the third step, which is managing, not engaging.
Okay.
So this is about limiting contact if necessary.
Right.
Setting those clear boundaries and not trying to have deep conversations
Right.
that they might not be capable of having.
It's about protecting yourself.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about protecting your own emotional well-being
Okay.
and recognizing their limitations.
It doesn't mean you don't care about them.
Right. It's about honoring yourself
Right.
and creating healthier dynamics in the relationship.
This is so helpful. I love this approach. It
Exactly.
feels much more empowering.
I think so too.
But we've talked a lot about what to avoid.
Right.
What does a healthy relationship look like?
That's such an important question. And, you know, it's not just about avoiding the negative.
Right.
It's about recognizing and embracing the positive. And Gibson has a really hopeful message here. Emotionally mature people do exist.
Oh, good. I was starting to worry.
So, you know, think about those qualities that really create that sense of safety,
Yeah.
respect, and genuine connection.
Okay.
Look for people who respect boundaries,
Okay.
who communicate openly and honestly,
Mm-hmm.
who are willing to apologize when they've messed up.
Those are all great qualities.
They are, and it requires a level of self-awareness
Right.
that emotionally immature people often struggle with.
Totally.
And, you know, emotionally mature people are also responsive to your needs.
Okay.
They empathize in a way that makes you feel safe and understood,
Okay.
and their sense of humor is lighthearted. You know, it doesn't come at anyone's expense.
It's about feeling seen and heard and valued
Exactly.
without having to like twist yourself into a pretzel
Right.
to please them.
Exactly. And here's the key takeaway. You deserve these things in your relationships.
Don't settle.
Don't settle.
Yeah, it's so easy to forget what we deserve.
It's true.
Yeah.
But the more you cultivate these qualities in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
the more you'll attract those who resonate with those values.
You create a positive cycle.
Exactly. It creates this positive cycle of emotional maturity and connection.
So by doing our own inner work,
Yes.
we're actually increasing our chances of finding those healthy, fulfilling relationships.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's interesting how this ties back to that feeling of emotional loneliness we talked about.
Right.
Because the more you embrace your true self
Yeah.
and cultivate those healthy relationships, the less you'll experience that pervasive sense of isolation.
It's like you're filling that void with real connection.
Beautifully said.
It's self-love.
Yes, it's about recognizing that you're not alone,
Mm-hmm.
that you're worthy of love and belonging,
Yeah.
and that you have the power to create those fulfilling relationships that nourish your soul.
That's amazing. I love that this is giving me so much hope and motivation to keep going on this path. So as we were talking about all this, one thing that really stood out to me in the book was Gibson's idea that recognizing emotional maturity in others can actually make us luckier in life.
Hmm.
I was like, what? How does that even work?
Yeah, it sounds kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But it makes sense when you think about it.
Okay.
Once you start to break free from those old patterns of seeking validation
Right.
from emotionally immature people,
Mhm.
you become more attuned to healthy reciprocal relationships.
You're not wasting time and energy
Exactly.
on those dead-end relationships.
You're free to focus on the people who are truly capable of giving you what you need.
So you're more open to those who are on the same wavelength. Those who are actually capable of that connection.
Yeah, it's like you've decluttered your emotional space,
I love that.
making room for those fulfilling relationships to come in.
So how does that translate to luck, though?
Well, think about it this way. When you're surrounded by emotionally mature people,
Okay.
you're more likely to be supported, encouraged,
Yeah.
uplifted. You know, you're more likely to be in environments that
Mhm.
foster growth,
Okay.
creativity, joy, and those are all fertile grounds
Right.
for those lucky breaks and opportunities.
It's like you've created an ecosystem
Yeah,
that supports those serendipitous moments.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just about external luck.
Okay.
It's also about that inner shift
Mhm.
that happens when you're living in alignment with your true self.
Right.
You radiate a certain confidence,
Okay.
authenticity that just draws people in and opens doors.
So you're attracting those healthier relationships.
Yes.
But also just all sorts of positive experiences.
Absolutely. And, you know, that inner sense of peace and fulfillment,
Mm-hmm.
That's the real lux.
regardless of what's happening externally.
Exactly.
This has been so eye-opening.
I'm glad.
We've learned about all these different types of emotionally immature parents and their impact.
Our own coping mechanisms, how to actually take steps to heal and build those better relationships.
Still a lot to unpack.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to having the power to break free from those patterns.
Absolutely.
Creating a life that's full of genuine connection.
Yes.
And emotional fulfillment.
You got it. I think for our listeners, this is just the beginning of their journey. What final words of wisdom would you offer as they continue on this path of healing and growth?
Well, I would say just remember that healing is a process.
Right.
Be patient with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Celebrate the progress you make.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to seek support if you need it.
Great advice.
And most importantly, trust your intuition. You know what feels right for you.
I love that. This has been such a great deep dive.
Thank you.
We've only just scratched the surface of what this book has to offer.
There's so much in there.
But I hope this has given you a new awareness and some tools to move forward.
I hope so too.
Until next time, keep diving deep and remember you are worthy of love, belonging, and those fulfilling relationships that you're looking for.
You deserve it.